which is interesting because that's what converted me to Judaism.
Okay.
And so my Christian college made me a Jew.
Kind Anderson-Gutiérrez. Right? Because you act like that. That's a long name. But I mean, what is that one? Think of the movie where it's like, my name is la 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 la.
And every like Latino name is just like so long. It's like Latino Alessandro Gutierrez Jr. The third.
Right, my dad tried adding in a second middle name for me, so mine would be Natasha Robin Veronica Baillères.
Oh my gosh.
But it's Natasha
Which is
Robin.
like gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to introduce yourself and give a little background about yourself for all of our listeners?
Yes, so like she said, my name is JJ, and I'm currently in a doctorate program for clinical psychology, but in undergrad, I also did psychology, and a lot of my research was on masculinity, the church, religiosity. I also worked on a violence prevention team. And then in my master's program at Columbia, where we both studied,
Yes.
I worked with our department head on spirituality, and it's as an intervention for like depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And now I'm focusing on gender-related issues, sexuality, and I'm gonna incorporate spirituality in there. It just, I gotta figure out the way to do it, because it's like there's not a lot of in the research, there's not a lot of spirituality integrated with gender or sexuality, identity development stuff. So I want to like spearhead that movement.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
So exciting. And I think that's kind of like my intention behind wanting to do this podcast, having conversation framed around spirituality, science, clinical psychology, to open up the realm for the people that are listening who haven't necessarily gone there, and maybe inspire other people to do the same, research more, read more.
Yeah, and it's just like psychology in itself is technically like a soft science, because it's not in a wet lab where like you're testing DNA or other things. In some labs you are, but I feel like spirituality is like an easy bridge with that too, because like it's the untangible that we're, you know, measuring and dancing with, and that's what I feel like makes it so just like easily connectable between those two. Of like, it just makes sense that we're studying psychology and spirituality, because like the language is similar. It kind of, once you connect the mind and body, you're like, it makes sense that there's a spiritual core. It makes sense that there's this larger narrative around us.
Right. The missing piece that I feel like a lot of science is missing. So if you could explain in short, I guess, what do you think drew you to clinical psychology, and what was your spiritual practice before studying it in the classroom? Maybe like the differences. Like for me, especially, I know that like, you know, I identified as Christian for a little while. I was baptized Catholic. Now I would identify, if I had to choose one, as Buddhist, I guess. But I like picking pieces from each one. And the Columbia program definitely changed my perspective on a lot of different religions, and made me feel more compassionate toward the resentment that I had towards certain religions that I practice, right? Like certain things I didn't agree with, certain books and certain, right? So a little about your perspective and your relationship with spirituality.
So grew up Christian as well, but never had like that connection to Jesus Christ, the Trinity, any of those things. Like I just went because we would go as a family and whatever, but it never like clicked for me, or never like, you know, was obviously you put on a show of like, oh my gosh, this is so great, empowering, all these things, like, oh, I'll give my life away. I'm not making fun of that in any way, but like that's just how I felt. I was just like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to say. You know, you learn the script. But then in college, I went to a Christian private college, but they had a class on you go visit like a mosque or a synagogue or a temple just for like a religious exposure, which is interesting because that's what converted me to Judaism.
Okay.
And so my Christian college made me a Jew.
I love that.
And which is so crazy because like when I visited synagogue for Shabbat, my first time walking in, it just like felt like this big welcoming presence of like, you can just show up as you are, don't have to put on a show, like whatever you are, we love it.
I love that.
And that was like the first Shabbat that I went to, and I was like, weird how I'm converting tomorrow.
So you knew it was a fit. You're
Yeah.
like, this is
And
my
so
place.
with that little click of like, I was like, this is actually where I'm supposed to be. This is where my religious spiritual journey, kind of jumps off from. Because like that was the first time that I felt like, oh, this makes sense. This language that they're speaking like actually is resonating. But that was like my religious journey. But my spiritual journey really started sophomore year in college when I was just in the commons area doing homework. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Arrival by Denis Villeneuve.
You think yeah.
With Amy Adams.
Okay.
So the score behind it, like the music, was like, I like really connect with music sometimes, and like it changes my life.
I'm with you on that.
And
yes.
so just watching the film, it sent me into an existential crisis. But then I was listening to the music, just doing my homework, and I was writing this paper on, it was for the sensation and perception class, and we were writing on the process involved of like, I'm going to reach for this cup and then bring it to my mouth and drink it. All the processes involved with that in your brain. It's a lot. It's very complex. And I was writing a paper on like, I had to connect it back to like scripture in some way of like, well, what did Paul think when he was like writing? Was it him? Was it God? How was that being transferred? And then I had like this just awakening in this commons area. I'm writing this paper and I look up and I'm like, oh, it makes sense of like the structures of humanity, why those people are talking right there, why we're walking this way. I could like feel these, like it was like I was on an LSD acid trip, or like ayahuasca or anything.
And this is with the background music. You downloaded the soundtrack.
Yeah, I'm listening on Spotify and just going ham on this paper, and then it just like hits me. And I think because, have you ever listened to those YouTube videos that have like a resonance, like a frequency?
Yes,
that's like with the earth or like a planet or something. I feel like there has to be something in the background of that score for that movie because it sent me. And then I was kind of like in a, not an unwell state, but just unstable state for like a couple days after that, because like I literally broke like the structure, the pattern in my brain, kind of like my pineal gland was like released in some way. Which the pineal gland, for those who don't know, is just like the mechanism in your brain that kind of allows for a deeper, maybe spiritual connection, or just a deeper mind-body connection with the world around you and everything. Some say it's like your third eye that connects you to the universe.
Open.
Yeah. And so at that moment, I like went on the other extreme of like, I'm God. Because I was like, I understand everything, and then everything is me, and I am everything.
Yes. So I think that you just said right there, repeat that one more time. I felt like I was God for a period of time, right? Like you had, and I think that whenever, if anyone could relate with this, like when you have your spiritual awakening or that moment that you resonate with, you go through a period where you almost feel yourself getting annoying to other people, right? When you're trying to explain it because they don't get it. And even now when you feel like someone's like newly awakened, does that like I remember, I'm just like, oh, I remember when that happened to me. Like I remember when I was there, and sometimes I almost wish like I was on that other end of the extreme. But what do you feel like now with like, how long ago was that? You said sophomore year, so
6 or 5 years ago.
So your journey 5 years ago. Since then, do you have any other moments that kind of like are either a peak or a low, or a peak or a low, that have changed your relationship with spirituality or religion since that moment?
I'd say that since that moment, it's only been like a like a rise of I've definitely like if you're looking at the stats of it, it's a general positive direction, but obviously like in there's down, up, or whatever, but it's generally going up, because after that moment I really integrated like meditating and mindfulness, and like I was studying psychology, so I knew the benefits of journaling and just like being connected with your thoughts and stuff. But I was like really like the way that I was journaling was like probably unreadable to like not my eyes. Like if anybody picks up my journal and reads it, they're gonna be like, what is happening here? Because I feel like I was just so tapped into this other like dimension in some way. And so just ever since then I've been really like intentional about connecting to the deeper self. And then the Columbia program, which is the spirituality, mind, body, that really put more language to like the experience of the beyond and what's here. And what did you think about Dr. Ethan? Because she like is a different being. I think that similar to your experience, I had this awakening experience, and it was weird that I was led to the Columbia program. Prior to going, I had gone to that Coachella festival that everyone loves, and then I had planned on going to the Stagecoach one, which was the following. I decided to sell my ticket last minute, went to Barcelona by myself for a month, and it was right before the program. And this is when I was still trying to dive deeper into that spirit that I felt within me, right? The God that I felt I held within me. I didn't necessarily think I was God, but I felt like God was in me instead of external, right? And before I was traditional hands, knees, floor. So when I was there, I was reading about Dr. Ethan, and I couldn't really put my finger on how I felt about her. And then when I finally got in her presence after that time of being by myself and really being able to think about my thoughts solo, because I didn't know anyone else in Barcelona, when I got to Colombia and I actually got to be in the room with her, I was just like, wow. Like, even when she speaks, it was just so, it's so intentional. Everything she says is so, it's like memorable. Like, you know what I mean? I wish I had powerful. It's so powerful. And I think that she is extremely enlightened. I think that she's in a tier of consciousness that I have a lot of work to do to get there. Same. But I think she's an amazing human, and I hope that I can, interact with Columbia more and be a part of the program just to, build a deeper relationship with her. How did you feel? I know you took the archetypal symbolism. Yep. I did the summer intensive. I got to know like my hand, my water was my symbols, but you took the full-on course, so I'm curious. The full course, and that was like really I'd say, so it's a lot of like Jung and the symbols there, but that really like propelled my consciousness of the unconscious way deeper, because like the reading that we were doing, the work that we were doing in class, it just really made me pay attention to like every single like thing that I'm wearing, my hair. Like I think we had a break in between one class, and my apartment was right across the street, so I went over and changed, and I changed my hair, like it was up in a bun or whatever. And I came back, and she was like, she like stopped class and was like, okay, everybody, do you notice that JJ is fully changed since the first portion of class? And I'm like, okay, I'm sweating now. What is she about to do? But she was doing it because like, those little changes. I did it because I was like, oh, I'm actually kind of hot in my sweater, and so I'm gonna go change, and my hair was like down, and so I put it up. But she was like connecting it to like, oh, so your unconscious is trying to tell you something, of like, maybe in a way of like you feel that you weren't seen in the first part of class, or that like there's some part of you that you needed to change to release yourself for the second part of class. And I'm just like, sure. Yeah.
Tell me
that
more.
Makes sense. And I'm sitting next to Terry, and then Jen is, you remember Jen Kraft? Yeah, she's on my left, and we're both like, okay.
Wow.
But, and then other part of the class, me and Terry were just like, throughout the whole class, we would, you know, whisper things back and forth, and not like talking bad about anyone, just like our thoughts. And Ethan called us out one time and was like, so I see you guys like whispering a lot. Can you tell the class like what you guys are talking about? And because we were like more in the observer role for that class, like we weren't as interactive, just because there's so much information, and especially from Ethan, it's like you only want to absorb. It's kind of too much to like process and then regurgitate into something cohesive for Ethan too. But she's just like, yeah, every word that she says, every phrase that she has, like it's like coming from the source of whatever it is. Yeah, I just like don't even, I know that she has kids, and I'm like, when she goes home, like, does she just show up and be like, Brandon, why did you choose that red book?
Well, we'll find out. Let's dive deeper.
Yeah, or like, you flip the page with your right hand and not your left hand. And I'm not making fun of her. I'm just like, because like she's so, like, don't want to say above, because we're all on the same plane, you know.
Yeah.
But like she just has this way of interacting with life that is so divine.
Right. I admire her, but I even tell myself sometimes when I go too deep thinking about thinking and thinking about thinking, that I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back, because sometimes when I personally dive too deep, it's such an overwhelming, and before that's, I feel like I'm going crazy. And I think that the craziest people are the happiest to an extent, because they pay attention to those things and admire and have appreciation, but also it's like, I have to make sure that I stay in this reality to an extent in order to operate and interact with other people.
Totally. And like, you know, you get in those, after a deep meditation or a deep awakening of some sort, you're kind of like, how can I interact and navigate this world in a regular way, a normal way after this moment? And like, sometimes you can't. And I think those are like humongous gifts too, because you're like just expanding so much, and it's like you can't operate like you were before. And like the people that don't understand, it's like, that's their loss. Right. And maybe they weren't supposed to be, that's the end of their chapter in your life, which is like hard, because it's like setting a boundary.
I love that you just said that, and I think that's probably going to be my intro for this, because I resonate with that so much. And I think that when I was younger, the people pleasing need for acceptance, I was seeking it from other people around me. And I think once you have that spiritual awakening, you seek it from elsewhere. And when you're seeking validation from the source, which some of us believe is within us to an extent, right? It's so much more fulfilling, and it's almost like I kind of want to spend more time alone. You know, I moved over, the reason why I moved from Santa Monica down to where I am now, kind of away from everyone, was so that I could have those moments of meditation and not feel like I had to re-enter the world right away, but I could, you know, go sit on the beach and really sit with those thoughts and feelings and emotions and experiences that I couldn't give words to. And I think the Columbia program has helped me come up with verbiage and terminology to express to other people what spirituality is for me and the experiences that I've had. And I'm in hopes to share these methods and maybe give the science behind what spirituality is, so that more people feel like they have access to it. Yeah. Right. But also accepting that sometimes the experiences and methods and ways of being in different tiers of consciousness aren't meant to be part of my book for other people, right? Like there's certain books that aren't supposed to warp together, I guess. And I think that in doing this podcast, I hope that having conversations from, your perspective, my perspective, and all the different perspectives people have with relationship to spirituality, religion, science, clinical psychology, and why we got into this field in itself will help others feel more curiosity. And maybe curiosity will send a spark of...
Yeah, that's like the biggest thing is being curious. Like, if anyone's going to take anything away from this podcast or just like being a spiritual being, is like, being curious is the best spiritual practice. You're always a student and you're always like just a child running through this world. Just to have like those childlike eyes is the best way to expand and learn and just like become the best version of yourself.
Yes.
In any season.
And if you could give any advice, I guess, to anyone that is, maybe they had some sort of moment similar to yours where they felt like an overwhelming sense of a spiritual experience, or like kind of like a sensory activity, right? Like when you were explaining your experience, when you felt your awakening, your senses were really activated, right? You understood people walking by.
You could literally see the energies.
What would you tell someone else, I guess, to do with that, right? Just out of your perspective, right? Because like you said, we're all students, we're all just trying to figure it out. But what would you just say, I guess, to someone who...
The easiest but hardest thing to do in that moment is to welcome it and to not try and find a way out of it in that moment, like for that day or for that weekend or something, to like really stay in that tension of like, what is this new lens that I just put on? Because it is scary. It's super like, oh my gosh, like I literally had conversations with myself of like, how can I just like go about and like drink tea on a regular day now without seeing the molecules in there like connect, or just like, having these conversations with myself that were like, how do I reintegrate back into society, because I'm so elevated now in this moment, but I do need to come back down because I need to live and eat and drink and whatever, but like for whatever moment that you're in, just like stay in it for 5 extra more minutes, just to like, I don't know, sit in it and like have that be your like meditative practice, because if you like engage with that in your brain, whenever you do meditate again, you'll go back to that moment. You'll like re-trigger that. You'll like bring more fuel to that just growth and stuff.
And I think when you were mentioning the journaling too, I think that for me, I try to journal when I do have really high moments or really low moments, so that I can dive back into that. So I'll read a segment to get me kind of into that headspace, to trigger the subconscious and bring back those feelings and sensory exercises to get back. And
with journaling, like it can literally be whatever you want it to be. Like it doesn't have to be full 10 pages of like just a novel. It can literally be like, sometimes I just do bullet points of like main takeaways, or like 5 words, or just like I draw what I'm seeing to the best of my ability.
I love that.
Or just main, like from the symbolisms, just like the main symbols from my dream last night. I don't have to connect them. I'm just going to write down the symbols that popped out.
And it's for you, right?
Yeah.
So like you're the one that's triggering the subconscious thoughts. You see your handwriting sometimes even, and I'm like, oh, I remember that. Or I see it like a stain from the teardrops on the pages or something.
It's
like
so good to make the intangible like physical on a piece of paper for your eyes, especially, just to see that.
I love it. I'm so happy that you were my first guest, JJ.
It's an honor. I'm grateful.
I admire you, and I love all of our conversations. Every time we have one, I always get something and makes me think about life in a different way, and you're always up to so many things, and I'm so grateful Columbia brought us together.
My lifers.
Right? Seriously. So again, this is JJ Anderson-Gutiérrez.
Yes.
And hopefully I'll have you on here again.
Yeah.
JJ is in LA studying now for his PhD.
25 miles away.
Let's
so
go.
it's not too far.
I know. So we'll reconnect, and thank you all for joining us, and we'll be back on here soon.